We'll get the slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about switch, but not really. I want to talk today about energy, global energy, and some of the challenges, and hopefully have a few laughs with you. Hope you have your thick skins on. It is California, and it's so easy, you know. Anyway, and being from Texas, you know, we got to have this ongoing thing. So, what can Kern County teach the world about energy? Well, there's a dilemma I have, and the dilemma is this: most people don't know how electricity is actually made. And they don't know where gasoline comes from. The dilemma is they think they do, okay? Because they've been fed stuff from various sources that they select to stream to themselves in the morning and confirm their biases and think that everybody agrees with them, okay? So here we are, it's a dilemma. What's the dialogue? The dialogue, energy, we all know, has had a transformational impact on the quality of human life. Transformational. Without it, we're all sitting here hungry and naked in the dirt. Okay? And I've been in a lot of places in the world today where people are hungry and naked in the dirt. Yet, political factions have created a good and bad energy dialogue in the public psyche. Renewables are good, fossils and nuclear are bad. That's pretty much the dialogue. Yet, a third of humans live in energy poverty on the planet today. So the roadmap for today, let's talk about the energy mix. What's it look like? What are the real environmental impacts of all forms of energy? What are the 3 E's? And finally, what's the power of energy? So this map, for every color on this map, and I hope you can see, because I have lots of slides, but you're going to love them, okay? It's not death by PowerPoint. Every color on this map is about 1 billion people today on Earth. So look at the population distribution. You can see the color code in the lower left. That's going to be the same for all of my slides. Green oil, red gas, gray coal, orange nuclear. We used to say nuclear in Texas for 8 years. There was a different president. And then we learned nuclear, and now I don't know what we're going to say. You know, everything is huge. So we'll say something. Anyway, 86% fossil fuels in the world today. How about geopolitically? Well, North America, no surprise, is about like the global mix. It's about 20% of it. You'd think Europe would be different. It turns out it's not. Europe and Russia are about the same. South America has a lot more hydro. They have topography and rainfall. Africa, more coal. The Middle East won't shock anybody. It's oil and gas. Okay. They're building a nuclear reactor, starting to look at some solar. And finally, Southeast Asia. Take a look. Half their energy from coal. This isn't electricity fuel. This is total energy. Now I'm going to scale these to be proportional to demand. Here we go. That's how much it's consumed today. Over half the people in the world live underneath that right color wheel. And they get half their energy from coal. That's more coal than the rest of the world combined times 2. Is China changing? Yeah, actually, for the first time, coal is just starting to roll over. We'll see where it heads. But look at it relative to the other fuels. It's massive. Has it changed through time? Yeah. Over the last 50 years, everything has gone up. And you can see the mix that's changed there with renewables and nuclear coming in and hydro over that time period. But let's get rid of the fossil fuels and nuclear and zoom in on the renewables. So here they are, mostly hydro over that 50 years. And let's keep zooming. Now you see the biofuels come in. And we can zoom further the last 15 or so years, solar and wind. And they are on exponential growth, as you've heard this morning. True. Everything grows exponentially if it succeeds initially. And then you can't have exponential growth forever. It goes linear, and then it rolls over. That's just math. Okay, that's the way things work. So these are succeeding with exponential growth in the phase they're in. Here's how it's going around the world. Asia in red, Europe in yellow. This is for wind. Growth in U.S. wind has been fantastic. And good old Texas, you know, back about a decade ago with Barry Smitherman at the PUC, we started putting wind out in West Texas, and we have way more wind than anybody now, close to 18 gigawatts. You can't drive out without seeing turbines in West Texas now. Some people like them. The people out there do like them. Brings jobs. Okay. And then solar. This is PV. And again, you can see the geopolitical mix of where the solar is located. And solar prices have been coming down, absolutely. This is the cost of the units themselves in orange there, and then the growth in solar install, remarkable growth. And I can show these costs in lots of different ways. You can look at them as levelized costs, et cetera. Quite often, even LCOE does not include some things like the storage that's been talked about and transmission and other costs that are needed to make them either base load or able to follow. So there's costs that are, not everybody fully understands what all goes into it. But absolutely, prices and costs have been coming down, and it's exciting. Here's the exact same data as a mix, not in real units, but as a percentage. So over a half a century, we've gone from 95% fossil fuels to 86%, with less oil, more gas, and a little bit less coal. Okay. Look at nuclear back in the 70s. Remember when Jimmy Carter declared, some of you are old enough, moral equivalent of war, energy. We started looking for other things. Nuclear took off for a while globally, and it's had sort of an interesting history. You can see the color there. It looks a lot like what? Renewables. 20 years, getting started, and we'll see where it heads. The challenge with all this is scale. If you get nothing else from me or nothing else from watching the film Switch, it's scale. The challenge of building a lot of things isn't easy. And the lower the density energy, the more things you have to build to collect it. And those things require materials and resources. And everything's a resource. Oil and gas and coal, uranium, thorium, the sun and the wind. Geothermal is a resource. Ask Iceland how often they move their wells. Tides and waves. Let's look at the electric fuel mix. Here's North America, and the forecast here I like. It said out by 2030, natural gas and coal would be sort of 50-50 at parity. And then you see the little bit growth in renewables and some nuclear. Has this happened? Yeah. In fact, it already happened. In a decade, coal went from 50%, or just a little more, down to 30%, and natural gas almost doubled. And renewables grew from 8 to 13. This is the fastest change in energy terms that we've seen or witnessed, okay? Remarkable. And as a result of that, CO2 emissions from coal about 2/3, natural gas about 1/3, the others not much. So those have changed as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So yes, it's happened. How did it happen? How many in the gas business? Let's go back just a decade to 2007, and I'm going to ask you to tell me, what will natural gas production look like in the United States in 2017 today? Here we are. Here's what it looked like then, 2010, and I'm going to give you some data. I'll give you the price, I promise. That's the price, and here are the rigs drilling for natural gas. I guarantee it. Now tell me what production looks like today of natural gas. That's the data, and you don't get that as forecasters, by the way. Would anybody have said this? Nope. Why? Fracking. Hydraulic fracking. Let's just look. The New York Times put the K in there. Let's just embrace it. Yeah. Fracking. Like nukes. You know, nuclear doesn't have a K, but nukes does. I'm sure we'll spell coal with a K next. Anybody from the Times? You know, K-O-A-L. Let's just put it in there. So we got the F word with a K, and, you know, fracking. Nearly half of U.S. gas comes from hydraulically fractured wells today. Nearly half in a decade. We've done some big studies at the Bureau where I am on this for the last 7 years. We've looked at the 4 big shale gas basins, the result of all that work with engineers, scientists, economists. Here's one future possibility, realization scenario, not a forecast because these are dynamic things. But if you look at the Barnett, the Fayetteville, the Haynesville, and then the Marcellus out into that future, this is a production scenario. Very realistic one, actually, probably underestimating. The question was, do we have enough natural gas in the U.S. to continue to replace coal like we saw? The answer we feel is yes. The Utica and gas coming from shale oil basins now and then conventionals, it's pretty remarkable amount of methane out there. Here's the price deck that this one was run on. That's the EIA price deck, and there's their forecast from it, and we work closely with them. They're starting to use our models in their annual energy outlooks now. Okay, pretty great team. The result of those 4 basins looks like this. Original gas in place is 3,000 trillion cubic feet. OOGP. Original OGIP. That chart that you looked at, that graph, produces 300 of that out to 2045, 10%. It leaves 90% of it still in the reservoir out to 2045. That's a pretty big target. I've got a son in the oil and gas business, geologist, a petroleum engineer, you know. People ask me, do you really believe this stuff you say? That or I lie to my kids. I probably do both, but 10%, 300 trillion cubic feet, whatever that is, 2,700 trillion cubic feet. Will we get some of that out? Sure. If there's demand, it's not really a resource issue, it's a demand challenge. What's the demand for different fuels going to be? If there's more demand for natural gas, we'll be going after some of those molecules, and technology will allow that. Globally, what's the resource look like? This is natural gas. It's the resource, these are big numbers, against the cost to get it. Those vary through time, so this is an older plot, but the point is, to the left of the white line is everything produced and consumed. To the right are potential resources out there. At $8, and here's the unconventional reservoirs. They're big numbers, right? At $8, remember those days? People were going after all this stuff. And then natural gas isn't fungible. It's geopolitically limited and traded and priced. So the success in North America brought the price down a lot, $2, $2.50, $3. And guess what? This stuff goes off the table if it's static. But when price come down, what happened? Costs follow. So watch the costs come down, and some of it stays on the table. The better parts of the better basins are still producing. Thus, the curve, even with rigs down and price down. So it's dynamic. Most people who report on energy things don't really express the dynamicism of this. I don't know if that's a word. Okay. Price, cost, technology, policy, politics, and demand all drive these resources. Crude oil has done the same thing. Fracking, half of the oil in the United States now comes from hydraulically fractured wells. Half. And look at the production curve. Would anybody have said you would have gone from 5 million barrels a day to 10 in a decade in this country? No. Okay. Let's take a look at U.S. production of oil, going way back to 1859, discovered in Titusville. Put that production curve we just looked at on there. Put a big green line on the edge of it, get rid of the nasty data. There it is, you know. You heard about peak oil? A little more quiet. Now they've switched to peak demand instead of peak supply. Probably the right approach. We could call it Twin Peaks. I don't know. You pick your own name for this stuff. The world hasn't followed this yet. But where do you find oil and gas? Those of you in the oil and gas business, where do you find oil and gas? Where it's been found before. These are just the source rocks. Where are we going to find more oil and gas? Regionally in the world. Russia, the Middle East, where the source rocks are mature. They have piles of it. Why don't they want to produce it yet? It's more expensive. I want to ship the cheap stuff. In fact, they're funding anti-fracking propaganda. Go check out the films that you make out here in California. And who paid for them? It's really fun, actually, to track that and see what we're digesting about some of this stuff and why. It's just business. Let's sell the cheap stuff before we produce the little more expensive stuff. Quietly, it's happening, though, already. So here's our mix, the U.S. energy mix. Look at what's happened in the last decade, and right there on the right end with oil and natural gas and growth in renewables, fracking, you've seen it, production of energy go up as high as it's ever been in the country. And as a result, our imports have gone down by half, mostly still liquids. It's a pretty interesting story. You won't read this in the Times. You won't read this story. Okay. Why? It doesn't follow the dialogue. Okay. Now, if we had continued to consume in the 70s at the rate we were, 0.5% below GDP growth when Jimmy Carter was president, that's the red line. That would be growth in energy consumption unconstrained, truly business as usual demand. And I look at demand, demand, demand. But instead, there's this giant gap between what we're consuming and what it would have been. That's efficiency. Better mileage, better lights, better insulation. We can do better, but it's a huge amount of energy that hasn't been consumed. In fact, if you look at that now, you can see that we were flat the last 25 years in the US, flat on demand even though GDP grew. So where's the oil coming from in the world? Look at these countries, Saudi, China, Russia, they continue to grow their production. The Middle East, OPEC, particularly Saudi, announced when they were getting worried about hydraulic fracturing that they were going to increase production. Remember that back about 3 years ago? And what did it do to price? Here's their production of Saudi, there's price. It plummeted. With 500,000 barrels a day increased, now about 1 million, it plummeted. We've always kind of said, yeah, gee, surprising that 500,000 million barrels a day can do that to price. Well, what was going on in the US at that time? Here. We grew 5.5 million barrels a day in production to go from 5 to 10. And the price stayed. 500,000 barrels a year increase. It wasn't doing anything to price until OPEC announced. So how much is that structural? How much is speculation? You decide. I'd hate to be an energy price forecaster. But it's good work. They're never right and they always get paid, so it's great, you know. But it's brutal. It's human behavior. Where did it come from? Bakken, Eagle Ford, and now the latest player is the Permian Basin. That's the blue curve, and look what's going on out there in the Permian. Remarkable. So I was quoted in the Times, you know, sheiks and shales cause this. They're both producing more oil. That's the fundamental driver. And that's what caused a lot of it. And it's a really successful business, isn't it? Aren't you all in the shale business just making money hand over fist? No. Some of you do, but most of you haven't. In fact, the blue shows the 30 independent shale producers' cash flow deficit. Hadn't been that great. Some get in at the right time in the right place, sell, make money. The next inherit at a different price point. Price goes down, a lot go out of business, M&As. 350,000 people lost their jobs in the world over the last 4 years since OPEC announced and price plummeted. These are big numbers. Here's the non-tight oil peer group, with the yellow line being cash flow positive. And here's the 5 major shale oil producers just starting to get to maybe profitable in the aggregate. So no, it's a risky business. Kind of like the oil and gas business. It's always been. A lot of people don't make much money, contrary to what you would read about obscene profits and excess profits and all this stuff. It's a tight margin, high expense, high risk business to deliver at scale that much energy. How about Europe? Have they done this like the US has? What do you think? Natural gas and nuclear grown in Europe, coal down. This was just rich. I was on the bicycle this morning. COP is going on in Germany. I can't remember which number it is. They meet so often. And it says a global 100% renewable electricity system is achievable today at every hour of every day in the year. This is from this morning. At less cost than a legacy system based primarily on fossil nuclear energy, according to a modeling study released this morning at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Germany. And it was written by, quote, "There's no reason to invest $1 more in fossil nuclear power," said Hans Josef Fell, president of the Berlin-based Energy Watch Group, which released the study. Well, how's Germany doing? Gee, they've consumed the same amount of coal for the last 6 years. They're taking imports, physical delivery from the US of coal from the powder to mix with their lignite to provide electricity to back up the solar and wind. Storage is a big challenge. Scalable, affordable, reliable. These aren't trivial at scale. Okay? I mean, the CO2 result of that little delivery of coal on trains to diesel-fired barges back on trains to Germany is not very good, if that's the goal. Intentions are, but let's look at outcomes. Intentions are great. Don't judge them. Let's look at outcomes and adapt and learn as we go forward. In fact, the gate Germany put up for CO2 is about as effective as this one so far. It's called Energiewende. It's their energy policy. And I say the same thing in Europe. You know, I like data. I like outcomes. And in fact, a lot of the rest of Europe follow Germany. So this is coal in Europe. The only ones coming down are good old UK and a couple others. So actually coal generation has come down some in Europe. As this has happened, what's happened to natural gas? Well, in Germany, and in the UK, it's gone back up. As they've decreased their coal, they're increasing their gas. Why? Because none of them are doing much in nuclear, except France. So for base load, coal, nuclear, natural gas, those are the big three. Here's the rest of Europe increasing natural gas, and you can see the coal from the plot before. Coal up, natural gas down, vice versa. Overall decreasing a little bit as renewables grow slowly. How about the Asia Pacific? Same scale, horizontal and vertical. And the gray is coal. Why? Why so much coal? Well, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's available, and it's reliable. It is growing their economy, and it's lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Well, it's kind of hard to argue with that, you know? Kern County, you can teach the world the vital importance of a balanced energy portfolio. And you have it here. You have all of these things here, except nukes. I don't think you have any nuclear. Do you have a nuclear reactor? One? Oh, perfect. And you're doing storage even. It's ideal. You are a microcosm for what the world looks like. Environmental impact. Here you are. Remember that? Probably not, but your grandparents might. Coast of California. Who knew there was fracking back then? You remember everything's fracking. I wouldn't have wanted to be there, but I guess these folks still managed to procreate somehow. Here we all are. So nonetheless, fracking is considered by the public in the U.S. and Western Europe a really mostly bad thing. And here here it is. Here's the frack truck. It's headed to the rig hauling frack fluids. Pretty low bridge. It's out here in California. And things are about to get ugly for the people in the valley, you know. It's so that's fracking. There are impacts from hydraulic fracturing. There are impacts, environmental impacts from the whole oil and gas business. It's a massive industry. You got to mine proppant sand off with water or can manufacture it at scale. And down near the bottom, I'm showing technologies that are coming that are improving the environmental impacts. The rig site itself, there's noise, there's dust, there's lights, there's rigs. There are more increased deaths from truck drivers, et cetera, around the rig site, for sure. Bigger operations. The well pad produces liquids. And so there was gas flaring going on for a while because there was no delivery systems for it. You know, these are environmental things. They're mostly local, not systemic. And then treat and dispose all this fluid. We got big studies going on now. Oklahoma, where I just was yesterday, has passed California a number of earthquakes. Now it's coming down again, but not a record they wanted, I don't think. And most of theirs aren't natural. Texas has our own. And that comes from disposal fluids being put down in wells and disposal wells, near faults, oriented correctly at volumes that cause the pressure to change, and they move earlier than they would have. Not a lot. We have 7,500 disposal wells in Texas. About a dozen are potentially affiliated with this. And then finally, the completion and production itself. And every picture you ever see makes it look like the horizontal well is just below your house. This one too. All right? You have to show it. These aren't to scale. Let's put them to scale. here we go. Vertical scale is now correct. The surface goes away. And here's your 500-foot frac. And let's look at real data. This is the Barnett. On the left are the deeper wells and the microseismicity, bigger than the actual hydraulically fractured zone, and the depth of freshwater aquifer up top, and to the shallowest on the right. Now, if you put a frac well right under the aquifer, yeah, you could crack into it, but most of this is rock, okay? Look at the tallest building in the world. To get a feeling for scale, let's just put one of your favorites here on top. Tom Cruise, sitting on the building. So solid rock between Tom and the earth, and put him for scale kind of where he belongs, and shrink the building down to scale, the shallowest wells and the aquifer. So some of these things that have been put into so-called documentaries, which really have been shown to be mostly fiction, but very powerful nonetheless. A lot of films are that way. We don't like facts as much anymore. We don't read really anymore. So we watch these videos and we believe them. Okay. That really isn't going on very often, if at all. But I've showed you the kinds of things that do happen around large oil and gas activities. So it's balance. There's these risks, and I participated last year in a pretty intensive shale governance forum over several sessions. And there's benefits, and you wobble back and forth between these things, but the risks on the bad energy seem to get amplified in the public's mind and their eye. All these risks, it's scary. The public is scared. They feel like this, They're in the running of the bulls. This is actually the winner of the last photo taken contest. And here's the runner-up. Same contest. Last photo taken. I love that picture. All right. So whatever happened to bridge building? Research and technology, education, communication about these things to make sure we understand what the real risks are, what the real benefits are, so we can move forward in a reasonable fashion. Remember this picture? Look to the right, fossil fuels, 86%, they produce carbon dioxide. The increase in CO2 to the atmosphere has increased a lot over the last 50 years. In North America and Europe, it hasn't. Did you know that? For 40 years, it's been essentially flat. Who would have known? You didn't read it in the Times. I love this. You have these out here at the restaurants, the little heaters with a propane tank under them, keep you warm when you're sitting outside. It's beautiful. Energy efficiency, burning fossil fuels. This one's in Aspen. I took this picture. Love Aspen. It's gorgeous. But let's just zoom in and see what Aspen thinks. Isn't it great? And as I was taking this picture, a Maserati drove by and honked at me. Remember? Most people don't know how electricity is made and where gasoline comes from. I see a lot of faces out here that are going, oh man, I like this data, but I'm not sure I like this guy. Here we go. North America, etc. So where are the increases? How about Asia? And then the developing world is just getting started, aren't they? Here they are. But that red has started to develop. Remember where they get their energy? Coal. Now let's just blame China. I was just over there a month ago. China's bad, they're producing all the CO2. Is it really a production challenge? To me, it's a consumption challenge. Anybody in the room not wearing at least something made in China? Who demands the products? Cheap, reliable, there for us. We do. Don't blame Asia. They just make the products. Let's look at, as consumers, that's where we have to start to think about reducing some of these things. And speaking of consumption, this is taken in China. It could be, yeah, you're thinking, yeah, it's here. Actually, it's Austin now, Houston. Auto sales in developing nations, rolling 12-month average. Brazil fell off a lot. Brazil has got some challenges. These follow the economy. You can see Russia. Mexico's growing. Here comes India. All right, a couple million, almost 3 million cars a year now. Now let's go to the developed nations, and there's India. And where's the rest? USA, EU, Japan, and see the recession impact? Different scale, right? Where's China? Right here. A decade ago, 5 million. Today, 27 million. What recession? And these are gasoline and diesel. Okay? How long does your car last? When you sell it for your plug-in hybrid, does you just throw it away? Or does somebody buy it and keep driving it? Aren't they all going to be electric? We've heard that. That's what Elon says, your boy. You know, they'll all be electric. Well, electric cars are growing exponentially. Everything grows exponentially if it succeeds. Then it goes linear, then it rolls over. China in red, the US in green. It's phenomenal. How many cars? 1.2% of the global fleet so far, close to 2% this year. Don't have the actual numbers yet, which is great. A million cars. It's a good start. What about the future? Here are some forecasts of cumulative electric vehicles starting at 2020 out to 2040. Bloomberg said it's going to be, in 2016 they said 400, and 2017, a year later, they made it 530. I don't quite know what changes in a year, except the forecast. And here comes OPEC. I'm going to keep the big one, by the way. Here comes OPEC. They said, no. It'll be just 40 million. Wait a minute. Maybe 300. Okay, a year later. And let's keep the big one. Here comes Exxon. They said, no. 70. Oh, wait, maybe 90 or 100. Keep the big one. So that's pretty tight. I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made this one up. Studies have shown accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. How many studies showed that? 87. It's perfect. So we'll come back to our accurate forecasts and ask ourselves, if we wanted to make 10% of the vehicle fleet in the world electric, there's 1.2 billion cars in the world, and it's growing. It would take 120 million cars. So 120 million cars, batteries for each of those. Actually, it's not a battery. It's 3,000 to 7,000 lithium-ion batteries the size of my finger in a battery pack. You'd have to average 10 million batteries a year. We aren't doing that now, so you'd have to grow toward more than that. Let's slide over to Exxon's forecast and say, well, if you need it by 2041, 5 million a year. What are we doing today? There's the big battery manufacturing folks, and they produce 1 million. About. I just did math. I didn't actually write them and ask them. I know 50 gigawatt hours per year, and I did an EV battery at 50 kilowatt hours a year, and you get 1 million. Okay. Now, the forecast for 2020 shows those growing tremendously, including a gigafactory. Elon Musk is one clever guy. I mean, these are cool names. A gigafactory. A giant chemical manufacturing plant. Okay. Refinery, no. Okay, so that's big numbers. What would that be? 150 gigawatt, if you add up all the red, that's 3 million a year. And we still need to get to 5 for Exxon and 10 for Bloomberg. All right, I showed you the fracking data. Let's look at the battery and renewable data. You have to mine and process this stuff. The metals and the chemicals and the rare earths come from somewhere. The earth. The economists call this green mining. It's rich. If it goes to batteries, it's green mining. Got to manufacture them. You got to build the transmission lines. In Texas, we built 5 big 345 kV power line systems. You have to have the battery factories. You got to build the farms, which is land, a lot of land. You can use it under wind. It's harder under solar collectors because it covers it. And then you have to do something with them because they do wear out. Where do they get disposed? What's the landfill? And we call this green. And I understand why for atmospheric reasons, but I like land, air, and sea. I want to look at all the environmental challenges of going to scale so that we're not naive and look back 25 years later and said, now look what we've left our kids. An earth that has been mined. Kern County can teach the world how to manage the environmental impacts and benefits of all forms of energy at scale. You can do this. Very few can. Let's talk about the 3 E's. Have some fun. Color-coded by how we voted in 2012 by state. All the states, population against energy consumption. The more people, the more you consume. Now, if you're Texas, you consume even more, okay, than the rest of the country per capita. And we're trying. Now, maybe there's a little China syndrome here. We produce a lot of stuff and we send it places like here, okay, just like China does, but we could do better. Keep going. So more people equal more energy consumption with no political split. Here we go. How about population against GSP, the economy of each state? Pretty tight. More people, a bigger economy. Right on a line, no political split. And let's close the circle. The economy against energy consumption, there's a slight political split, barely, but basically, again, the bigger the economy, the more energy you consume here. And Texas is higher up. How about for emissions? This is as close as it gets. The R-squareds on here are 0.9 something. Energy consumption, the more you consume, the more CO2 you emit because of the mix, okay? And Texas is on the far right. And there's California. I've labeled the big states. There are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who are good at math and those who aren't, okay? So let's talk about the Clean Power Plan in a way that maybe you've not heard. These are the emissions from the big fuels in the country today. Coal, 2/3, natural gas, 1/3, everything else, not much. Remember the mix? We're about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 generating now. Here's the CO2 emissions. In 2015, when the power plan was proposed, post-Paris, we were emitting about 1,900 million metric tons of CO2 from power gen. In 2005, we were emitting 2,400. Why did I pick 2005? Come on, energy-educated people. Why 2005? How many are passionate about the Clean Power Plan? Don't be shy. Nobody? So why did we pick 2005? That's the base year for the Clean Power Plan. That's the year we're going to compare to. Why? Well, it's the highest producing year, tied with 2007. So we were going to come down from there to 2030 with a 32% reduction to 1,600 million metric tons. That was the goal of the Clean Power Plan. In fact, we were on a trend to go lower than that, 1,400, without it. I like outcomes. I don't try not to judge intentions. We were on a trend to go lower. We were already 2/3 of the way there to the goals when it was proposed. Did you know that? How hard to get the last third, and we're already trending there, but we could pat ourselves on the back and say, nice job. We did it. Shale gas, renewables, coal policy, those were already driving it lower and still are. So why do it? Here's our CO2. If you're going to impose a plan and reduce CO2 emissions, I would think to be simple, you just say the biggest emitters, Texas, has to do the most, and everybody else a little less, until we get some wedge of CO2 emissions out of this. Seems logical to me, but I'm kind of a simple-minded thinker. It's not what we did. We said, there's the targets. Every state, I plotted them. Wait a minute, now there's a political split. Who has to reduce a lot more? The red states. Who has to reduce less? The blue states. I'm sure this wasn't part of the design. It just is an outcome. And look at these 4 states right there with Florida. Ready? 2016 vote happened. What happened? 6 states flipped, and those are them. And now the wedge is even bigger. Folks, when we start thinking about national policy, including the Paris Accords, which had some seriously political approaches to accomplishing it, including wealth redistribution and other things that are political approaches, you're going to get political fights. No kidding. And when you do that, people are going to go, wait a minute. Okay? Now, so, you know, the red states aren't real bright, but we probably know which end of the chainsaw we're pulling on sometimes. All right. Energy. You're even laughing. This is great. I was trying to get you to laugh this whole time. No, you right here. No, don't look back. I'm looking right at you. Energy, the environment, and the economy. It's right here, right? They overlap. They're intricately linked. It's the 3 E's. What is it really? Academia and NGOs, the economy, governments, energy, the industry, working together, ideally, to try to address some of these things. Now, yeah, you can have the drill baby drill crowd in energy. Great. Brilliant. You know. Equally brilliant. Keep it in the ground. You have senators proposing this. Academics, fully renewable by. You just saw one this morning. Okay? What is it really? Academia, research, regulation, markets. We're trying to bring these things together with legal, social, and political systems. They're all interactive. It's complicated. That's why you're here. It's not easy, but we better work together on this if we're going to start to solve things. I love that space. I call it the radical middle. I've published on it. Why? It's radical. Why? There's nobody there. You know, it's just lonely. Please come compromise. Admit you're wrong. Listen. Read. If we pull this off, we'll have secure energy. At least we'll have the chance for secure energy here, California, the U.S., and globally. Kern County can teach the world why it's critical to engage in the radical middle. You're doing it. We're here in this room. You're doing it. Finally, the power of energy. This is the population of the world. It's growing out toward 10, 11 billion, a UN forecast. Remember, our energy consumption, it's not magic. It follows the trace. It's accelerating a little bit. Africa and Asia represent 4 out of 5 people in the world today in population. And Africa is proposed to double from 1 to 2 billion over the next 40 to 50 years. The world could be 100% wind, wave, and solar by 2030, this study said, if just for political will. Really? Let's see what that would look like. There it is. I couldn't get it low enough. I left a few fossil fuels in, but there it is. Now that would be an interesting energy supply curve. Folks, I'm sorry, but I think if you actually think that could happen, if just for political will, you probably need this sign. Caution, fire is hot. Do not breathe under the water. Yeah. Here it is by population. 4 out of 5, but they only consume 40% of the energy today in the world because they're just starting to grow. The rest of us consume the rest of it. Per capita GDP against per capita electricity consumption. Ready? By nation, the developed nations over 25 years, largely flat. We continue to grow economically, consume flat per capita, can come down, it's high. The developing nations are just starting up this curve. Okay, electricity against GDP. Look in the lower left corner. Who do we find? A third of the world, India and China. China leading, India following, just getting started. And then keep looking in the lower left. There's some more nations, Niger, Chad, Haiti. 1.2 billion people without any electricity today. It's down to about 800 million, depending on what you read. Let's just call it 3 United States with no electricity in the world today. That's wrong, okay? So there's nothing that's good or right about that. We visited a lot of them. We made a film called Switch. It's online. You can view it for free. We've passed 15 million viewers. We're in thousands of universities, K through 12 now, about this global energy scene. It's been awarded by environmental groups, energy groups, et cetera, because it's objective. Just went around and looked at it all. What did we miss? We missed 3 billion people unintentionally. So we're making another film called Switch On. I'd give my time to this, but we make it with your investments and provide what I'm showing you to the world so they can educate. What do the 3 billion people there want to do? They want to do what we've done, right? Hopefully not as high, more efficient, but nothing should preclude that from happening. So we formed the Switch Energy Alliance, and I don't know if I have control up here to actually play this little video or not. Can you rip that for me?
Energy powers the modern world. Everywhere we live, everywhere we go. Everything we do depends on energy. I'm Scott Tinker, and for 15 years I've been searching for the truth about our energy transition. And the only way to find it was to go out and get it.
Whoa. Everywhere you can see is
I traveled the globe to discover what it would take to go from the energy that built our world to the energy that will shape our future. And that film, Switch, has now reached 15 million viewers worldwide and impacted countless others. But there's another huge challenge in energy that we hardly looked into.
We have 600 million people in this country without access to electricity. Can you imagine? That's 2 United States.
And that's just in India. There are 3 billion people around the world living with little or no energy. Providing energy at the scale needed will require new technology and new ideas from every sector of the energy industry. What will it really take to add power to half the planet? In Switch On, I'm going to find out, starting in Colombia. The Arhuaco people asked us to help them power their villages.
And if you have a need for electricity in a way that we could help you, we would like to learn that.
We'll tell the story of energy development in the most human way, by being part of the solution. You can be part of the solution too. Join the Switch Energy Alliance. Help us power the people and help educate the world on energy.
If you look at electricity and poverty, this is income, severe poverty across the bottom against electrification rate. $3 a day. South America, the size of the circle related to population, 90% electrified, 10 to 20% in poverty. When you put in Asia, the numbers get very big. Less electrification, more poverty, and finally Africa. Energy and poverty are related. If you have electricity, it gives you the chance to start to lift yourself out of poverty. We went to this little village in Ecuador where they have 95% electrification rate in Ecuador. Followed the line here to this village. You saw it in the clip. They're still cooking with wood in dirt floors and no walls. We went into the bedroom. You can see the fluorescent bulb up top and that wire hanging there. That's electricity. It didn't work. The little girl we met slept with her father and mother in that bed with no mattress, open air again. This is severe poverty. She tied a thing on my wrist, which I don't usually wear, but I won't take that one off. Okay. Severe poverty with electricity. Electricity doesn't end poverty. Energy doesn't, but poverty can't be ended without energy. Our world at night, composite satellite photo. Remember these? You can see where the electricity is. Let's scale them. Now you can see why the electricity is. Those with energy have it. There are people that want to keep it in the ground. Let's show what that looks like. There's the same spheres with no fossil fuels. 86% gone. Let's darken those lights, 86%. And I don't judge the intentions, but I don't want to keep them in poverty. Turn the lights back on. In fact, let's lift them from poverty. I don't think climate and poverty are mutually exclusive. There are solutions here that can be done that are both. This is my friend, Matt. Okay, it's crappy Photoshop. But he talks a lot about energy, passionate about it. Here's my friend Leo. Leo speaks to the UN floor, passionate about energy. And here's Mark. He's a big voice in it too, right? In fact, if Leo, Matt, and Mark were here today, this room would be standing room only if they were talking about energy. It'd be like me talking about filmmaking because I made one. This is actually my friend Rex. And this is actually my friend Ernie, Secretary of Energy under Obama. This is actually my friend Rick. The reason I show you these is because people are swayed by emotions, not data and facts. The emotional leaders were the first figures. These are the folks trying to figure this out. And I'm not saying they've got it, not bragging on them. I know them, work with them. But they're trying to solve these things as you are as we move forward. And they're huge issues, aren't they? Population, water, healthcare, education, housing, hunger, immigration, the status of women in the world today, unemployment, crime. All of these things are underpinned by energy. In fact, the global issues, these underpin poverty, and they really inhibit freedom. Why is there immigration? Because there's no hope or opportunity where you are today. It's time to power the people. It's time that we've stepped up to the plate and do what we need to do. Provide energy to the world. Some of that will be renewable, like with our friends in Colombia. There's no grid. There are no roads. You saw the roads. There are no pipelines. It's going to be distributed renewable energy. Some of it won't. Dense energy matters. Big grids matter. Cities are becoming more and more dense, more efficient. It's this mix that is vital to this world. Kern County can teach the world the transformational power of energy. What can you teach the world? The vital importance of a balanced portfolio. You can teach the world how to manage environmental impacts and benefits of all forms of energy. Why it's critical to engage in the radical middle and the transformational power of energy. And you can help folks understand where oil comes from and how electricity is made. You can help marginalize the good and the bad energy dialogue. End that. It's not productive. It allows us to do things around the rational fringes instead of and you can lead an honest future energy conversation. You can lead that. And I'd love to work with you to do that. If nobody's done it recently, I want to thank you for what you do. My guess is in the energy world, when you're asked on an airplane, what do? You say, I'm just... Sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm in the energy business, and I try to lift the world out of poverty. What do you do? It's a pretty good start. So thanks for what you do. I got to catch my corporate jet back to good old Texas. But I really appreciate being here. Thank you.